I think in a way Leonardo has said everything that's important. Well, my job is to hopefully bring you towards something you already know or have experienced in your lives, and to reinforce that contact with something already present in you. I think I have no video, no slides, no props or anything, but I thought there's a very major source here in the room, which is you. And just for a moment, I'd like you to be aware of all the other people in the room and think of them as minds. All these minds in this room. What could you do if you actually put these minds together? Instead of spending a great deal of your lives, I suspect, almost fighting with the other minds or competing with the other minds. Just think what could be produced out of this room if at the moment you're separate minds which you have to battle to be independent, to make sure that other people hear your ideas, your voice is heard. If you didn't have to spend all that energy giving yourself a position in society and maintain your role, you could simply, some way, share minds. It may appear a dream, but it's been a feature of our modern world, the quest for this. There was an extraordinary Englishman, a strange name called at the beginning of the 20th century who was aware of this. He said in society there are people with different kinds of mind. One group he called conservative, the other sensitive, because they respond differently to information. But he said we have to find a world in which these people can actually be in the same room together and work together. And since that time, now more than 100 years, various people have done research into this, because it's a strange thing. It's like a very, 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 very ancient thing, and also an extremely modern thing. As Leonardo mentioned, one of my mentors was the quantum physicist David Bohm, and I know that it was through his work on fundamental physics that he came to appreciate the nature of dialogue. And this may seem strange to you, that a scientist would see things about the nature of dialogue, which for other people was not so obvious, because he was searching all the time for what is it really about the nature of the universe. And you may think this is crazy. I started talking about dialogue, now we're on to the universe. But this is, for me, the passion that dialogue is not simply a humanistic thing of being nice to other people, talking to them and having conversations, but is getting into the very process by which the whole universe is sustained. Now, at the beginning, too, I'd like to make this perhaps strange equation. Dialogue equals mind. You don't have mind without dialogue. This is, of course, the spirit which informed the Socratic dialogues in Greece. And I must pause and try to elicit from you the feeling of this. See, I say, mind equals dialogue, dialogue equals mind. Because you yourself can't have a mind unless you can dialogue with yourself. And you must ask you to reflect on this. How do you see yourselves? Do you see yourselves sat inside here, inside your skull? These pictures of the brain you get from popular science, this so-called calculating, decoding, emotional machine going on, producing all these thoughts, and you don't know how. Is that really your mind? No, it's unless a person who really thinks is in deep conversation within himself. And conversation goes on wherever there is mind. And another thing about mind is that it's, in a way, and this was a big thing for my other great mentor in dialogue, a group analyst a psychotherapist called Patrick Damari, and he said this is the whole threat in the world is because one thing authorities detest more than anything else is mind. Mind is hated by authorities everywhere. Because with mind, you get human beings who can think, and that's the threat, the big threat. As soon as you get the people together into groups, we can handle them, because then we can have various mechanisms for dealing with groups of people. But having a load of individuals with mind is the most terrifying thing for authorities. An example in whether the authorities are those of religion or of the state. In England, we had this amazing group of people, the Quakers in the 17th century, who would have this capacity for speaking together in silence, as Leonardo was saying. But they were, of course, hated by the authorities, imprisoned, almost tortured. And they had to eventually, some of them, flee to America, where they made a whole state, now called Pennsylvania, after Penn. William Penn, the Quaker. Now, come back to your own state here. Here you are sitting, listening to me. And this is, in a way, is a complete denial of dialogue. Me standing up here as a person, as a so-called authority figure, himself as an expert. And you're out there as the many. And you know in your lives, this goes on being enacted throughout the world. You know, the chap up the front and the many. It's happened in school, happens in businesses, happens in the church, happens in politics, everywhere. All this is being reinforced time and time again, everywhere. And this reinforcement matters. I'll get to another aspect of that reinforcement later. Because you have to see these mind in the human, this strange human world, this mind will not develop just of itself biologically. Something else has got to happen. This is one of the puzzles in evolution now. What was this other thing that happened? We know it's connected with our capacity for communication, for being able to share information between people. And let's project ourselves back 20,000 years or so, and we know there was evidence of meeting places for people in which they would do trade. This was 20,000 years ago. And they would also trade genes, so intermarriage and so on. And they would trade memes, not only genes, but memes. What is called by Dawkins, the units of meaning. And so trade happened, about 20,000 years ago. And this was the development of this mind which could expand the perception of the universe and everything else. Without it, it wouldn't have happened. None of these expansions into knowledge would ever have happened without this. But I want to go on to dialogue in the sense in which I mean it, and to produce for you, or simply state, a kind of just a picture which I want you to visualize. And it's a very simple picture. And say at the beginning that what I'm talking about is a kind of dialogue which is very purist. You see, a lot of people all around the world experimenting with this, and they're doing terrific jobs in all sorts of regions in terms of helping people who are disadvantaged, conflict resolution, all kinds of things are going on. And they all entail this, getting people together to speak to each other. So in the kind of dialogue, and I hope some of you will come. I think I've got an opportunity tomorrow morning to have a dialogue group, and I hope some of you will come and experience it. What you have is just a circle of people, and the number of people is important. Between about 15 and 20 is best. And they sit in a room, and all they do is talk. And this is in spite of The speaker earlier on today said words bring confusion, and certainly the words do bring confusion, but confusion is not a total bad thing. All they do is speak, so they don't dance, they don't sing, they don't make tea, they don't, move out of the circle, because the circle is like an alchemical, hermetic circle. And all they have done is to say, we will agree to be there and to stay there for 1 hour and a half. And somebody at the beginning says, begin, and somebody at the end says, finish. And they go away and they don't even talk about it again, evermore. Why do this? This is what the kind of thing I mean by dialogue. Why do it is because can help people get in touch with something which is going on all the time, but is covered up. These layers and layers, it's like Microsoft's programming, layers and layers of additions over the years until you've lost track with what you already have, what you can already do. Now, I want you to reflect and say, one thing which tends to happen in all your conversations, as somebody wrote to me or asked a question about this, look, just about all day we're talking, and talking all the time. What's all this fuss about dialogue? I'm doing it all the time. When I say, well, yes, you are, but you don't know it. You are drawing upon dialogue, but it's being shaped from the outside into something limiting, and definitely limiting. Now, one of the ways in which it's limited is based on simply the number 2. Most of our social lives is dominated by the number 2. And that is for and against, you and me, superior and inferior, and all these sorts of things. But you try and remember conversations you have, and nearly, I expect 99% of them are conversations you have with one other person. And so a conversation for you is back and forth. And I think of it as ping pong, ding, 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 back and forth. And the typical situation is, of course, you have this talk going on, and somebody else is speaking, and as Leonardo pointed towards listening as a problem, while the other person is speaking, you're occupied in thinking about what you're going to say. So you can bring out this wonderful point which you're going to make to the person. Yeah. But it's just one other person. Now, can you imagine what a conversation is like between 10 people? Yeah. How often have you been in a conversation between 10 people? You might say, well, I've been to meetings with 10 people. Well, that's not a conversation between 10 people. If you look what's happening, all the time it's twofold, him and me. The different pairs happen in a room. You talk to one person at a time. Now, this is incredibly restricting. It means that everything is caught in this twofoldness, this dichotomy, this split. To do something different from that requires very special conditions. Now, I have one of my mentors, an American friend who was a novelist, and he spent a lot of time in Asia, and he said it's nearly their traditional culture has almost disappeared in Japan and Vietnam and so on. And he said he had traces still of the people able to have this kind of conversation, which was a whole group of people would be in conversation. But they lost it under westernization. And they lost it because of wanting to get results. To get results means, imagine what's happening in your conversations. You're doing two basic kinds of things. If it's with your family and friends, you tend to be just reinforcing relationships. If it's in business, it's to do with getting a result, an outcome. See? But hardly ever is it to do with what's happening in that present moment, here and now.